Today's video is all about your camera's autofocus, the modes and ways to use it, and how it works and when to use what. So autofocus is pretty cool. Yeah, that worked. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Focus. Just about every modern camera has three types of autofocus systems. They go by different names, but here's the basics that apply pretty much to everything, no matter what the name. So the first is an Autofocus S, AFS, and the S stands for single, usually single. So what that means is with a half push of the shutter button, so a half push down, the autofocus system is going to grab focus on a subject, and no matter where you move this to now, it is focused that far away. So say it focused 12 inches away, no matter what I point this at, even if the closest thing is a mile away, the camera is still focused 12 inches away. That's autofocus single. AFS is what it's usually called. So AFS is good for when your camera's on a tripod, your subject's not moving, those kind of situations. It's the one I use the most. It's most common for me. The next kind of autofocus system is called AF, Autofocus C. AFC. And what that does, the C stands for continuous. So AFC, when I push the button down halfway, let me change that. When I push the button down halfway, the camera will always be autofocusing. It'll look at the focus point, which I'll talk about in a minute, and whatever's underneath that point, whatever that distance is, will be what gets focused on as long as I keep this pushed down halfway. So if I focus on my hand and then move my hand farther away, the camera will autofocus on that point. If I move my hand to a different point, whatever is now under that point, that distance will be the autofocus distance. You can actually see it happening in this video. As I put my hand closer to the video camera, now that's what's in focus. My face is out of focus. If I move this up, my hand out of the way, it focuses on my face. That's autofocus continuous. Great for moving objects or when you need to move something in or out of the frame, especially when the distance to the subject that you want to focus on changes. Autofocus continuous. Different camera systems have different successes with this. Some are really good. The more recent cameras and the ones that are a little more expensive do a pretty good job at this with continuous motion. I use AFC continuous when I'm doing events and the subjects are moving farther from and closer to me and farther away. So that's a handy thing to have. You don't have to keep half unpressing, unpress every time your subject distance changes. Another thing some cameras have in addition to the AFC is they have an eye tracking system. So you can tell it to look for faces or eyes or both. And then, because that's usually, well, for a lot of photographers, that's what we take pictures of. So it'll lock onto faces and then follow that face around or look for the next face if there isn't a face. Again, the cameras are getting pretty good at that. So it's for portrait photographers, event photographers, with people in their events, that's a great assist, especially when there's busy scenes and you need to focus on the composition. You let the camera do the focusing work. So that's AFC. And then the last focusing method is called manual, the M for manual. It's where there's a focusing ring on just about every lens. It's usually the ring closest to the front of the camera. And you'll just turn that, and that means you are adjusting the focus yourself. Some people prefer to do this. A lot of video folks use this because it's accurate for them and what they need. That lets them change focus and control focus because cameras in videos are often moving a lot. So you don't want the focus to change unexpectedly. So that's why video folks use this a lot. And then some photographers just prefer to focus that way. Again, that's personal preference. There's lots of ways to make your camera focus. There's no one right or wrong way. Again, every camera is going to be different how you set this all up. As I mentioned, those are the three basic ones: manual, AFC for continuous, and AFS for single. A lot of camera systems will have some kind of servo or I can't remember the other name they call it, and I apologize. I'll maybe post it below. Or I guess it would go this way. Which way? Right to left. There we go. Anyway, where you put it in this mode, and it tries and intelligently determines, do I need to use continual or single focus? I've never really used it, so I don't know how well it works or not, but that's sometimes another mode. There's sometimes 4 or 5 total focus modes, with 4 being autofocus and 1 being the manual. Check your camera, see how it works. Another thing that's different from camera to camera is how you set the focus mode. Some cameras, you set it on the lens. Some cameras, you set it on the body. My camera sets it on the body. There's a switch here that goes from S to C to M. And then other cameras, you do it through a menu system. So you hold a button down and then move a dial to say which focus mode you want to be in. So check your camera, see which one works best for you in your camera system. Do be aware, I know I think it's on Canons. No, Nikon does it too. There'll be an autofocus on the lens, and if that's set to manual, even though your camera body is set to autofocus, the lens will override that, and now you're in manual focus mode, and if you wonder why your camera isn't focusing when you half button push, that's why. So that's some of the focusing systems. Another thing, couple topics related to focusing. First, I want to talk about, there's a method of autofocusing that's different than doing a half button push to make the autofocus happen. It's often called back button focusing. And the reason for that is because there's a button on the back of a camera that can be designated when you push it, that engages autofocus. I personally don't use that. A lot of people like it because then they can just do this, and then this becomes the click to take the photo, so they're not halfway. I've gotten so used, my muscle memory, plus the location of where my thumb and hands work, plus my eye. I shoot with my left eye on my viewfinder, so this puts, when I do this, my thumb is right on my glasses. Plus, when I'm pushing that down, I tend to push the shutter button at the same time. Maybe I'm just not coordinated enough. Plus, I have the ergonomics of shooting with my left eye puts my thumb knuckle right on my glasses when I do that. So back button focusing would be where you designate a button, or it's already designated on the back of your camera that you usually would push with your thumb, and that makes autofocus happen. So you can push it once and then it's focused at that point. So it's like AFS, single, or you can hold it down and now you're AFC, continuous, and is while you'll click. So a couple advantages to that. Some people love it, swear by it. Again, I've not gotten used to it, so I personally don't use it. It's just muscle memory, I think, for me. And last but not least, related to focus. If you've ever looked through your viewfinder on your camera and wondered, even though you know the camera said it focused, you got the green square that says I focused, or whatever your color is in your camera, but it doesn't look sharp through the viewfinder. Believe it or not, there's a focus on the viewfinder as well. Again, different cameras put this in different locations. On my Fuji, it's on the left side of the hump here, the prism looking thing, the viewfinder area. And that's a dial that lets you dial in basically focus on the viewfinder again. Some photographers who wear glasses don't like to wear glasses when they photograph. So if you take your glasses off, this basically becomes like eyeglasses for your viewfinder. But if it gets bumped or nudged or accidentally moved, or then it's going to be blurry through here if it's not at the 0 point for whatever your eyes are. I think Canon and Nikon's, that little wheel, it's usually a little wheel with a plus and minus on it, is to the right-hand side of the viewfinder. So again, if you're ever looking through your viewfinder and it's not sharp, even though you know the camera focus, check your diopter, D-I-O-P-T-E-R, the diopter, and then find that and just look through the viewfinder, turn the dial until it looks sharp through the viewfinder. What I do for that actually is I look at the number display in the viewfinder, and here's my tip for using the diopter. I'll look at the numbers and get them sharp. as sharp as possible, because then that's the easiest way for me to tell that the viewfinder is set to my vision with the diopter. So we've talked about focusing systems. Let's talk about focus points. Focus points. So most cameras can have focus points that are clustered around the middle. And that's good, because a lot of times that's where we put the subject. But in this case, the subject is off to the right, that silver car in the front. So I've moved my focus point, which is indicated by this green box. And you can also see how many focus points this camera system has. They cover quite a bit of the screen. In the newer version of this camera I have, that goes pretty much all the way to the corner. So you can see you have all these focus points to choose from. On newer cameras, that's what you'll get, especially on the mirrorless cameras or ones that are a little more expensive. Also, you can change the size of the focus point. So a larger focus point will cover obviously a larger area. This tends to be not as precise a focusing. It tends to be a little slower. So if I push the button down for halfway, it will focus. Sometimes it gets a little confusing, like if you're doing something with details like up close to flowers, it might not know which leaf you want to focus on. But you can see it works just fine here. I do tend to prefer a smaller focus point, so I'll dial that back down. Let me get that back down. I usually go right about here. I don't go to the smallest. I go about here, sometimes even here. I found that works well for me. So this is a quick way to shift focus without doing a lot of work. You don't have to move the camera. If your camera doesn't have focus points that go out closer to the edges, and that's where you want your subject to be, you have to do a process that's called focus and recompose. So what I'll do is I'm gonna first focus on, we'll focus on the yellow car. So I'm gonna put that, so I'm gonna assume my focus point can only be in the middle. So I'm just gonna focus on the yellow car, and then I'm gonna move and take the picture. When you do that, you have to be really careful. You have to be careful that you don't change the distance from the subject when you do that camera swing. Even just a little motion of front or back, depending on how close you are to the subject, can throw your subject just a little bit out of focus and make it not sharp. So lots to do with focusing. Obviously it's a very important in our photos to have sharp photos, and focusing that is autofocus is great. The newer camera systems are really fast, very accurate. They don't get in your way of taking photos most of the time. So I love taking advantage of the autofocus systems in the cameras I use, and I'm really, really grateful for it, especially as it's a lot of work just looking around the scene in the frame of your camera to make all that look good, plus worrying about one more thing of making sure that it's technically sharp as I want it to be with the focusing system. So I'm really, really grateful for autofocus. I hope that video has been helpful. If you have questions related to autofocus and you would like to leave them in the comments below, I'd love to receive those and try and help you out. Look forward to talking to you again soon about more camera stuff. Have fun taking photos, and have a good day.